It's a beautiful day. All is calm and peaceful in the meadow. Or is it? If you look closely, very closely, you'll discover a whole new world with a world of difference, full of exciting adventure and desperate conflict.
Richard Adams' Watership Down tends to be one of those animated features you might have fumbled upon by accident when you were a simple-minded child that didn't know any better, thanks to your parents, whom also didn't know any better, letting you watch it because, hey, it's a cartoon, those are for kids, right? Right? Then you see Bunny's being slaughtered by a dog and you are traumatized for life. Thanks, parents who didn't know any better. Why didn't you know any better? In all seriousness, this film, along with the adaptation of Animal Farm, has been deeply ingrained in my subconscious mind ever since I witnessed its existence at an age when my mental faculties had barely become developing. And much like Animal Farm, I was both scared and fascinated by it. Even though I couldn't understand anything that was going on other than the basic premise of everything wants to kill rabbits, I ended up watching it multiple times. One way or the other, my experience with such different, adult-oriented animations might have helped founding my future interest in the artistic and communicative potential of the medium. So, for both the sake of my childhood nostalgia and adulthood's maturation, let us rediscover that 1978's classic Watership Down. Wait a minute! Okay, so, apparently, in between 1999 and 2001, Britain decided to unleash to the world a children's animated series based off Richard Adams' novel for the telly. I can think of at least 10 ways it might have gone wrong, and I was a bit surprised when none of these problems actually showed up in its TV transliteration. At least judging from this first episode, that is. The original text and possible subtext didn't seem to suffer the usual dumbing down that tends to occur whenever something is, shall we say, adapted to the taste and sensibilities of a younger audience. In truth, the writers have shown more or less the same amount of respect for the story as the 1978's film. The narrative is intact, as well as the stakes and dangers the rabbits have faced and will face. The only major difference is the notable absence of violence and the characters' design being more cartoonish and child-friendly compared to the realistic-looking models of the film, which is a fair trade in my opinion. So, the writing per se is not the problem here. The animation, on the other hand... makes this cartoon nearly unwatchable. Its crippling lack of frames per second turns every attempt at emotion awkward at best, cringe-worthy at worst, with the supposed action-packed moments being the most excruciating to witness as they become embarrassingly slow and over-prolonged. There is a dog chasing you! Get on the bloody plank already! There are well-known ways to get around a limited animation budget. Old-school anime used to edit still frames and reused footage in a dynamic way in order to grant their action scenes an actual sense of urgency, while still preserving the overall pacing. By the looks of it, Watership Down either had only enough money for the color palette, or the animators were really that lazy. The unfortunate result is a sleep-inducing, below-average animation with no sense of pacing whatsoever. Unless, of course, the unnecessarily long chasing scene was slowed down on purpose to fill 20 minutes of running time, which would be infuriating, to say the very least. Almost as infuriating as the horrible payoffs in Adventure Time. But I'm getting off track. I have no idea what that sound is supposed to be, but it sure isn't a seagull, let me tell you. The story is as follows. A group of ragtag bunnies left their home because their resident runt, Fiver, whom just happens to be a seer, because why wouldn't he be a seer, foresaw the tragic end of their colony. If you remember the film, it was quite a graphic depiction. I am extremely bothered by the fact that the episode begins with them already on the run, as opposed to show us when they decided to leave and what they left behind. It would have given the audience a reason to care about their struggle, but more importantly, it would have filled enough running time to cut off this horrible chasing sequence entirely. I really hate this sequence. After all that pointlessness, the youngest of the group meets up with some bird.
I'm sorry, you're a gull, aren't you?
Yeah, gull.
And the bird is German. Okay, I believe it's about time to finally address the elephant in the room. If you're familiar with the concept of the death of the author, you might be inclined to agree Richard Adams' story to be a perfect recipient to apply said concept. After all, when an author goes out of his way to create an entire folklore and mythology enriched with religious beliefs and a made-up language, the Lapin, to complement a diegesis about countryside rabbits fighting for their survival in a world that wants them dead, a story isn't just a story anymore. Despite the author claiming that Watership Down was just something he made up to entertain his daughters, that didn't stop everyone to draw their own conclusions about what it all meant and represented, which is a good thing, mind you. It couldn't just be the Aeneid with rabbits. It had to be an allegory about the timeless struggles between tyranny and freedom, reason and blind emotion, and the individual and the corporate state. What with all the religious symbolism, the elements from comparative mythology, the hero's journey and the such like. What I'm getting at is that unless a specific element in the story is openly defying a specific reading of said story, Watership Down can be about multiple things depending on your own sensibilities and views of the world. Unfortunately, it cannot be about the Holocaust. I am aware that's one of the more popular theories, and while I didn't think it was necessarily just about the Holocaust, I like to imagine it was still an allegory about the multiple struggles and hardships that the Jewish people had always faced and most likely will face, which would have been backed up by such narrative elements as the parable of El Arairah. In this parable, the god Frith made all other animals a mortal enemy to the Lapin race, and they would have to use their cunning in order to survive the onslaught, much like the real-world parallel of the Jewish people being pretty much persecuted by everyone at any point in history, yet still managing to survive everything that was thrown at them. Plus, the search of the so-called Promised Land, which they're not even subtle about it in the TV show, could have been compared to the search of Israel. It's just too bad that the mere existence of this bird makes all that impossible. If the rabbits are the Jewish, it makes absolutely no sense for them to befriend a German bird. You know, unless that bird is actually Liam Neeson, but that would be just silly.
I didn't do enough.
Okay, that took longer than I expected. What else is there in this train wreck of a barely acceptable animation? You're stuck. You're stuck in debt. Are you serious? Meow, don't mind me, I'm just watching you. Eventually they all reach the titular Watership Down, and that's when the episode ends. To recap, lazy animation, lazy animation, lazy, 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 lazy. The voice acting is pretty decent though, far superior than in the 1978 film, which doesn't take much effort considering that voice work was absolutely horrendous, so much so it ruined the entire film. Whenever the characters weren't mumbling among themselves incomprehensibly, their complete lack of emotional involvement in the story was very palpable. At least, the voice actors in the TV show are committed to the roles.
I led Pipkin into this. I won't leave him.
If you stay, I stay.
What if Hawkbill is right, Hazel? What if there is no safe place for us?
And it's not like it's getting any clearer, is it? Do you see any high hills? I don't.
Get moving.
You're afraid to go back because you deserted the house. Flavour!
And that's pretty much the only nice thing I'll say about it. I honestly cannot bring myself to watch more than one episode of this series, but if I'll ever do, I'll let you know about it. Now, if you will excuse me, I have to go hunt.
You're a girl, aren't you?
I didn't do enough.